All right, and you folks can take it away. All set.
Good morning, everybody. My name is Gayane Torosyan, and I'm here with my colleague, Dr. Brian Lowe. Um, we are both working at SUNY Oneonta, SUNY College at actually SUNY University at Oneonta. I teach in the Department of Communication and Media, and my colleague, Dr. Lowe, teaches in sociology. If you want to say hi, Brian.
Hi, good morning, everyone. Thanks very much for joining us.
Good morning. Okay, so I'll begin our presentation because the study that we're going to share with you all happened in one of my classes last year, actually exactly a year ago. I was teaching media law, and we have a topic in media law that refers to intellectual property, authorship rights, and original work. It was at the same time that my colleague Amani Ismail, who lives in Cairo, Egypt, and not participating here today because she's not part of SUNY. And also, this is going to be more about digital learning rather than the abstract ethical questions. I'm just giving Amani credit because we used some of her work as our background to talk about this study. But she's a full author, and my colleague Brian Lowe and I co-teach together. And Brian also works in the faculty center. He's a faculty fellow, and we'll share some more thoughts at the end of this little presentation. So this is an exploratory paper about artificial intelligence used as a tool in a classroom setting. We surveyed 68 undergrad students at SUNY Oneonta in a media law class. The questions were addressing our students' positions on academic integrity and academic misconduct. Questions included things like, what do you use when you conduct a library search? What do you use to check your grammar? Are you using Grammarly? Are you using ChatGPT? And just in a little bit of context, me being a representative of the communication media department, I have taught digital media and a number of other classes such as participatory media that directly discuss the emergence, the development, the future, and the interdisciplinary nature of digital media today. So this is going to be a very interdisciplinary question in general, but right now we're narrowing it down to our students' classroom experiences, their views, their thoughts, their critical thoughts on the appropriateness or the ethics of using artificial intelligence or similar tools in classroom learning. So we're looking at the contemporary educational landscape, which actually started changing quite a lot last year when students suddenly all downloaded ChatGPT and started showing me things on their phones in our digital media class, demonstrating their fluency as digital natives compared to us digital immigrants. Um, as to their ability to use that technology, to critique it, to understand its emergence, the ownership issues of technological platforms. So from digital media classes, I borrowed the concepts of internet centrism and technological determinism, whereas my colleague, Dr. Lowe, Brian, will actually talk about the faculty perspective on things and present the side of the institution that helps faculty navigate those difficult questions. So our findings will be related to intellectual property and fairness in assessing student work, things like how do you detect plagiarism or how do you punish for plagiarism, and whether using artificial intelligence counts as plagiarism. So this paper addressed multidimensional debates about technology. And again, it's co-written by Amani Ismail, Dr. Ismail, who teaches in Cairo. She's actually a dean of a college. So just in the introduction to our study, we understand that the digital revolution came with fruits and challenges. And one of the challenges is the intellectual appropriation that has become so easy right now. And the central question here is whether artificial intelligence generates content that belongs to someone necessarily, and whether using that content counts as cheating. So, yes, the answer is that it does take the form of plagiarism sometimes, and plagiarism is very often very common among university students because some of them are not even told in other institutions, I know in other systems and in other countries, that cutting and pasting content from, let's say, Wikipedia is necessarily wrong. So this conversation that we're having today is really centered around artificial intelligence and the use of ChatGPT. Also, things like Turnitin platforms or anti-plagiarism programs, Turnitin or Zero GPT, asking the question about how prepared our students are to deal with challenges presented by artificial intelligence. So the conceptual framework is academic integrity and the ability of students and educators to use the fruits of other people's labor. We're not talking about direct impersonation of other people, like forging documents, copying and pasting, but usually just using content generation, which seems benign at the beginning. But we need to understand that with the advent of new technologies, creating content that is not genuinely ours has become so much more available and easy. Things like three-dimensional printing and reproduction. So there is a little bit of conceptual framework. There is a little bit of theory here. Conway and Groshek talk about media students, specifically journalism students, and observing the differences between journalism students and other students regarding the question of artificial intelligence. It seems like students who are studying media law and journalism specifically as part of their majors, as part of their programs, those students are more versed in understanding the ethical questions. In other conceptual thoughts, Moriarty and Wilson argue that in handling academic integrity cases against students, both justice and consistency are going to be crucial. So this is looking at the pedagogy side of this. Though the two values are connected together, but consistency creates impartiality, both in the students' perception of reality and in their trust in justice that will be delivered by the teacher. So if you don't tell them from the beginning that they cannot use ChatGPT, how are they going to know not to use it? So based on these concepts and these questions, we would be looking at the following research questions. How do college students perceive intellectual property and academic misconduct against a backdrop of increased use of AI in facilitating their writing assignments? So using AI and other tools just to do their homework, to study. And question number 2, how can we contextualize the findings within literature on the technology and human progress dynamic? So in other words, how are we contribute to overall knowledge creation? I just want to throw in another concept, technopoly, a book, Technopoly by Neil Postman. Neil Postman is a classic. He wrote his book in 1992, The Potential Alteration of Ethical Standards Regarding the Use of Smart Technology, represents what he describes as the submission of all forms of cultural life to the sovereignty of technique and technology. So in that sense, we have internet centrism, relying on the internet, and technological determinism, trusting technology with our future, that technology determines all. So seeing the internet as something positive is part of the the theoretical framework, and Neil Postman contributed as one of the early thinkers about technology. So as we see in the quote from Postman, technology is always unforeseen consequences. It's not always clear at the beginning who or what will win and who or what will lose. So here are the research questions again. I'm just going to move on to the method. The method was a survey. We surveyed SUNY Oneonta students in a media law class that I was leading, but Brian Lowe, Professor Brian Lowe, is here with us to represent the students, the particular students that we teach at SUNY Oneonta, and some of the general education. And we have this program, Red Dragon seminars. How are our students prepared to deal with challenges, ethical challenges like this one? So we obtained institutional review board approval in the semester last spring. Participating students were provided with a written consent form, which they did sign before taking a survey that consisted of 10 essential questions and just a few demographic questions. So we asked the students whether they are 18 years of age. And if they are of age, if they're adults, do they consent to letting us use their answers as part of this study? Because it's one thing to be of age and completely another thing to rely on FERPA, their right to protect their information, their content, their views. So in some of our findings, we saw that more than 65.5% of all responding students who had given consent to agreed to participate, those students said that it is appropriate to use plagiarism detecting software at universities, and about 32.8%, basically 33%, said no, it's not a good idea to use software to detect plagiarism. And we saw an almost consistent 1.7%, actually 1.72% of all responding students who gave permission to use their answers in this study, declining to answer this question. So this number was really consistent with maybe the number of students who did not agree to be part of the study or just simply did not answer a question. So because it's such a small percentage, we can just look at the bigger picture. In a pie chart form, one of the first questions we asked in our survey was, should universities allow the use of AI software, artificial intelligence? And 42% minority of students, which is indicated in orange color here, supported the use of AI software in responding to written assignments or preparing presentations. The next big chunk was 35% of students saying that schools should ban AI entirely. 5% in this case gave no answer, and 18.5%, this was the most interesting group of students. They recognized the dilemma. In their answers, we saw both sides of the argument. On the one hand, it is good technology that expands our horizons, but on the other hand, it is not entirely our intellectual work. The next question, the big question, the open-ended sort of question, actually, no, it's yes or no. Should universities use text matching software to detect cheating? The biggest chunk of answers, 49%, and this is out of 68 responses. 49% supported the use, 20% were against the use, and 19% again recognized that this is a dilemma. It's an ethical dilemma. They could see both sides of the problem. And this 1/5 of the group of respondents actually represents the space where we can conduct our work. These are the undecided students, but also, people who are speaking against the use of text matching software to catch cheaters, they can be persuaded otherwise as well. And a very, very strong support for penalties against students using plagiarism. Should universities penalize students for plagiarism? 67% of our respondents said yes, they support penalties. 16% recognized the dilemma, seeing both sides of the argument and ready to talk about it. 14% gave no answer because they just didn't want to speak against their own interests, I guess. And 3% spoke firmly against penalties. So as we see, a very, very small minority of students speaks against penalizing cheating. So findings continued, we asked open-ended questions following each yes or no question, and that supported the open-ended answers were coded. The results matched what we found in the close-ended yes or no. And a sample response was from one student. I think using text matching software is necessary because of how easy it is to plagiarize. From an educator's perspective, you want to know what your students are understanding, whether they're understanding material and using their own words from research they find instead of copying and pasting information that they discover, apparently using technology. And this student also thinks that this will help teach how to cite sources correctly without the penalty of plagiarism or somebody's work. And this actually means that students understand that you can accidentally plagiarize if you use citations wrongly. There are possibilities of accidental plagiarism, as one student wrote, which can happen and be easily resolved. There should be an added feature to scan for AI written papers. So again, findings continue. We have the percentages, which I will let you explore later because I want to give some time to Brian. So the questions are, where should educators draw the line in determining the acceptability of using AI-based tools in college education? Or on a more profound level, what is the role of intellectuals as guardians of ethics in balancing the influence of technological determinism over acceptable moral societal norms? And finally, the conclusion is that this study is just a glimpse into the world of competing perspectives, and the use of AI in higher education is still a very much unexplored issue. And in this undergrad-based study, we saw controversies that are mirrored in other levels of education, high school and postgraduate studies, higher, even affecting us as faculty, as researchers. What is a proper way of avoiding plagiarism? And scholars and educators have to negotiate this reality with our future still unclear, requiring time and experience to allow for various scenarios to evolve. And I'm handing this over to Brian to continue, bring us some examples from some information from this morning's conversation. Brian?
All right, thank you very much for that, and good morning. I'm sorry, almost good afternoon
Yes.
to everyone who joined us. Thank you. Just to reiterate for those of you who joined midstream, I was not a participant in this particular study, but I am currently a member of our faculty center at SUNY Oneonta, and so I'm getting a little bit more of an institution-wide sense about what is going on with AI. And I just came from an event that involved 3 of our reference librarians that are both examining the use of AI in higher education and instructing specifically our undergraduates. And one of the points that really came through to me, and I wanted to bring this up, hopefully we'll have a bit of time to discuss this, was just the ontological uncertainty amongst our students about what AI is. Because our reference librarians certainly pointed out that, for example, they need to reinforce with students that AIs like ChatGPT are not search engines, number one, but also that simply because something is written that is based on something that the AI finds on the internet is no guarantor of its validity or reliability. It just struck me, and I just want to be clear, this is my observation, not the reference librarians, but one of my roles in the sociology department at SUNY Oneonta is that I regularly teach a class in sociological theories. And it really struck me as just such a great illustration of Karl Marx's fetishism of commodities, where the commodity is produced by workers and yet is treated as though it has a life of its own and is somehow independent of the workers that created it, in the same way that what is created by AI is viewed by students as perhaps having a certain amount of validity or veracity, independent of the fact that this was created by, in some cases, a generative AI, but they just didn't, again, based on this view from the reference librarians, the students seem to be uncertain of that what they were getting in terms of information, in terms of what was created, was not necessarily, excuse me, was not necessarily correct. And also the reference librarians made a point of discussing hallucinations with students, that the AI may create something that is entirely untrue. And I'm also mentioning this as a shameless bid for self-promotion, because if you're interested at all in disinformation, we will be presenting our discussion of teaching first-year students about disinformation tomorrow early afternoon. And I apologize if that was too much of a shameless bid. But the other point that the reference librarians brought up, and again, just to this broader view, is that, and I think this came up with, or was meant, really reflected in some of the earlier points made in the survey findings here, is that there's just ambiguity about what AI is and how to handle it. And while there does seem to be consensus that plagiarism is bad and that plagiarism should be punished, exactly what plagiarism is and how do we note that, is a bit more ambiguous amongst our students. But I'm going to bring my comments to a close here so we have time for a little bit of discussion. So thank you.
Thank you. Do we have any questions? I am answering one question from Anna Wong, if this is okay to, make it public because it's in the chat. It's open to everyone. The questions were, how many students completed the survey? The answer is 68. Are they all undergrad students, first year, second year, third year, fourth year? What are the percentages? Mostly first and second year, and it really, it does matter. We should look at the percentages of what year they are. And I think that's a very good question. Fortunately, the data is still there and we can access the data. So thank you, Anna, for this question. I just wanted to add that non-participating students who answered positively to being underage, they still did the work as part of their classroom assignment. So this was not wasted time. They did the learning because they received something to read at first. It was, as I mentioned, about original work, what counts as original work and what's appropriation, because this is a media law class after all. And so this was an exploratory study, and I really appreciate the comment about surveying faculty potentially in the future, because that's exactly what we can do. Okay. And Peter is asking or saying that it seems to me that we need to teach effective and ethical approaches to AI. They will need to know this in their professional lives. That is absolutely correct. And I will turn this over to Brian in a second, but I know myself when I'm writing something for publication, like a media law chapter, for example, can I use AI to format my paper? Can I use AI for the style? And the answer is always no, because it's very clear from the very beginning. When they give you the task, they say, please do not use AI, period. No AI generated content. And you know what I've discovered? I want to share this with the students. You can do better than AI. It is certainly true for faculty, but I want the students to understand that they're better than AI. And I'm turning over to Brian for comments, if you want.
Thank you. Just in terms of, yes, I concur about the ethical use of AI. And part of that, in addition to just questions of the epistemological quality of AI, that what is produced. And I also strongly concur that our students can, right now, I think, can do better than what AI is producing. But for us more broadly, what is it that we are willing or not willing to tolerate in terms of AI? So this is anecdotal, but I think it's indicative of these questions. I know there was a controversy within our fine arts department because some students had submitted work that had been generated through AI. And the submission instructions did not explicitly forbid AI. Now, presumably, that was just on the assumption that if you're going to if you're going to submit art to be considered for inclusion in a juried show, it's got to be yours. So just in terms of these broader questions about what is ethical, beyond just the use of AI and whether or not we're declaring this. I know Cornell recently released a report about how really matters to consider when it comes to university-wide policies about the use of AI. For example, right now on our campus, we don't have an overarching policy that it's left up to individual faculty. And then, of course, there's the broader question of if we have suspicions about something being AI generated, how do we track that down in a way that's valid so we're not bringing accusations against students without due cause, but also that it's just not incredibly time intensive, because for all of us, if we have dealt with questions of cheating or plagiarism in a very analog way, that just takes a lot of time and energy. And how is it that we're going to deal with these kinds of questions in the very near future? Unfortunately, I think is a question that's with us for the duration.
Thank you, Brian. We have a couple more minutes, and we see a comment from Peter again. Using artificial intelligence with human direction can offer more than AI alone. I do think, however, that AI can supplement learning and the production of intellectual materials. I agree completely, because things like format, I think the machine can format style, like capitalization, punctuation. I would trust the machine with that, but only that. When it comes to choices, I think it needs to be a person. And as one of my other colleagues mentioned, Akim Koderman, I should give him, the ethical thing is to give him credit. He says that AI can be used effectively by students who are linguistically restricted, say they don't speak very good English and it's an English language. They can use it for translation, for accessibility. I'm married to someone who runs a 60-person lab, and his English is his third, and I would say, by quality, it's his fifth language among three. And sometimes he can use AI to make his emails a little more polite or a little more grammatically correct. That's the only place it can be useful right now. Otherwise, there have to be real clear policy, and it's not there yet. We're not there yet. But yes, it can generate intellectual value, definitely. because it does have the capacity. I was fascinated by Dennis E. Tennant's presentation of the way artificial intelligence works, because this is not just a matter of new media or sociology or education or computer science. It is also linguistics, how AI works. It is based on probability. Every letter is built, added based on the probability of its occurrence. Dennis E. Tennant is a linguist at Columbia University. It is fascinating, but it's also very mechanical. And part of it could be random. I think we are at the limit of our time.
Yep, we're at 2:10, so I'm going to go ahead and stop the recording.